Muslims believe that the Quran was revealed to Muhammad by the angel Gabriel, but many of Muhammad's contemporaries were convinced that he was copying earlier stories, some of which were fables, and passing them off as divine revelations. Interestingly, 14 centuries after Muhammad's critics repeatedly accused him of plagiarizing fables, Muslim scholars are starting to agree. Let's find out why. In Surah 18, we read about the sleepers of the cave, a group of people who supposedly went to sleep in a cave and woke up 300 years later. They knew it wasn't true. They treated the story as a fable. But now it's in the Quran, and more than 1 billion people believe that it really happened. According to Surah 19, Jesus began preaching as soon as he came out of Mary's womb. This story comes from the 6th century Arabic infancy gospel. The story of Satan refusing to bow down to Adam in Surah 15 comes from the 1st century Jewish apocryphal work, The Life of Adam and Eve. The story of a bird teaching Cain how to bury his brother in Surah 5 comes from Mishnah Sanhedrin. The tale of Solomon talking to animals in Surah 27 comes from the 2nd Targum of the book of Esther. The account of Jesus giving life to clay birds in Surah 5 comes from a 2nd century work called the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. One of the most conspicuous legends in the Quran is the story of Dhul Qarnayn. In Surah 18, Allah says that Dhul Qarnayn traveled west and found the place where the sun sets, traveled east and found the place where the sun rises, built a big wall to keep out the hordes of Gog and Magog. We know where this story comes from. It comes from what's called the Alexander Romance, collections of legends about Alexander the Great. Some Muslims react to legends in the Quran by concluding that the Quran is not from God. But other Muslims have a different reaction. Muslim scholars like Shabir Ali believe that it's perfectly acceptable for the Quran to use fables to teach lessons. What I find most interesting when Muslim scholars admit that the Quran is filled with myths, fables, and legends is that this is exactly what the people around Muhammad said when he started delivering these revelations. Muhammad's contemporaries recognized these stories in the Quran as myths, fables, and legends, even according to the Quran. Surah 6, verse 25. When they come to thee to dispute with thee, the infidels say, verily, this is nothing but fables of the ancients. Surah 8, verse 31. And when our signs were being recited to them, they said, we have already heard. If we wished, we could say the like of this. This is naught but the fairy tales of the ancients. So, when Muhammad delivered his revelations about the sleepers of the cave or about Dhul Qarnayn, the people around him kept saying, we've heard these stories before. We know where these stories come from. These are fables. They're fairy tales. They're bedtime stories. And Muslim scholars are finally starting to agree.